Welcome to the Filmed Live Musicals podcast, a podcast about stage musicals that have been legally filmed and publicly distributed. The Filmed Live Musicals website contains information on nearly 200 musicals that have been captured live. Check it out at filmedlivemusicals.com. And now, on with the show. Welcome to episode 45 of the Filmed Live Musicals podcast. I'm your host, Luisa Lyons, and my guests today are Kit Goldstein Grant and Kenny Malone. Kit is a musical theater composer, lyricist, librettist, and teaching artist whose work has been performed in South Africa and the US. She is the founder of Paper Kite Arts and a founding member of New York City's Composers Collective. Kenny Malone is an award-winning correspondent for NPR's Planet Money, a podcast dedicated to explaining the economy. Planet Money Buys a Superhero is a 5-part experiment in superhero economics that dives into the world of superhero rights ownership, public domain, and licensing. Microface has gone on to inspire the creation of a comic book, soda and Gouda cheese labels, films, and now a musical. Microface the Musical was performed in concert at Roulette in Brooklyn, New York on May 10th as part of a special recorded live episode of Planet Money hosted by Kenny Malone and Robert Smith. Welcome, Kenny and Kit.
Thank you.
Nice to be here.
I'm delighted to bring you here to talk about this very special and unique project. So to start us off, Kenny, can you tell us a bit more about Planet Money Buys a Superhero?
Sure. So Planet Money is a show that has a bit of a history of these kind of throw ourselves into an area to try and understand it. So we've bought barrels of oil to try and understand oil markets. We launched a satellite to understand the commercialization of space. And it was dawning on us right around the time like Avengers Endgame had become the biggest movie ever. And like you looked at a rundown of the top 10 movies, it was like superhero, superhero, superhero. It was dawning on us that like superhero intellectual property had become its own kind of economy or force in the economy. And in order to understand that, we devised this project where we would try to buy one of Marvel's superheroes. They have like 7,000 characters, and we surmise that they don't need all of them, and certainly some are kind of crappy anyway. We failed to buy one of them. They did not let us. And then we went sort of dumpster diving through the annals of superhero history and saw what had fallen into the public domain, because superheroes, like everything else, eventually fall into the public domain. And that is where we found this bonkers character from 1943 with sonic superpowers. He was wearing a microphone mask, and his name was Microface. Though his face was normal sized, he has a microphone on his face. That's the thing. It was very confusing.
Absolutely perfect for a podcast.
Oh yeah.
Very ahead of its time, although also not, because radios are a thing.
we did in fact identify with this character as perhaps the first podcaster. Who knows? Hard to prove, but he was a podcaster before his time, for sure.
I love that. And where does Kit come into the picture? How does a musical come about of Microface?
So one of the things we wanted to explore, in addition to just intellectual property in general, was what you do once you have intellectual property. So once we had kind of like spun our version of Microface by making a comic book, we created a version of this public domain character that Planet Money could own. We were like, all right, I think this is where we license, right? Like this is where licensing happens. I don't know. And so we did just a call out, and we were like, do you want to license Microface for, I don't know, an action figure, this, that? We jokingly were like a Broadway musical, because it is our Robert Smith's and my favorite form of entertainment and art. We did not think anyone would actually take us up on that. And then we got a bunch of responses, and like buried in the bottom of the pile, truly like this was given to us by someone who was sifting through the email on like the day we were about to like interview people. The person was like, oh, by the way, you did get this thing with an attachment. It's like it seems to be some kind of a demo or something. And in fact, here was this person who had written a demo song for a Microface musical. And we were just like, what? This is better than we could have ever imagined. The song was so good. And so, of course, we immediately emailed Kit.
Julie Taymor, step aside. It is no longer Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark. It is Microface the Musical, hopefully with much less injury involved.
Fewer people fell. Fewer people
Yes.
fell from the roof, I can tell you that.
So, Kit,
Yes.
had you been listening to Planet Money and learning about Microface?
I've been listening to Planet Money for years. I'm a fan of Planet Money. It's one of my favorite podcasts. And so I listened to the series. And when they got to this part, I was just instantly like, well, of course, here's the song that I will write. So I was out pushing the stroller with my son, who was about in the 1-year-old-ish range then. I guess he would be 1.5 then. And so, he was at that age. You could push him around in the stroller while he took a nap and while you made up a song in your head. And that was a very convenient age. So I, worked out the song and then sent them a note when I got home. And the rest was history.
I can whisper softly and you hear it all around. I can play a bass that rumbles through the ground.
So they had me on their Shark Tank edition of Planet Money, where people pitched different ideas for shows. And of course, my thing was slightly different than the general licensing scheme of I come in and license your thing. This was more like, well, I will write this musical, which then basically you'll produce. So basically, I will license from you, the character, to write this, and then you can license the musical from me to produce it, if that makes sense. So it was kind of a whole licensing circle going on there.
Yeah, a licensing loop, if you will.
Yes.
The way the best intellectual property works, right?
Yes.
That's right. In a Gordian knot, it ties itself.
Yeah.
That's right.
But I was just so fascinated when I heard about this character because he's so likable and he's so odd. Like he has these unusual powers. He's not your normal superhero, but also the way that Planet Money reinvented him, especially he is a radio reporter. And so you're able to sort of combine all of those things together. And it's just like a wonderful, goofy character, basically, who's really fun to write songs for.
Luisa, do we need to run down Microface's superpowers for you? Should we
yes,
do that?
please. Go for it.
All right. Let's see how many we can name off here.
Okay.
So first of all, microphone mask, right? Micro mask can project his voice all over the place, can change his voice, can disguise it and make it sound like, the police are coming when they're not. That's a big one.
Photoelectric vision. He can see through almost anything. That's
through
the phrase,
almost
right?
anything. It says it's very specific. Anything. It says through almost anything. It does not specify through what he cannot see, but there's something. It's a good little dramatic, hole there. Super hearing, like he can hear like from far away. He can hear through things. So the hearing is very good.
He can make very loud noises, as with everything else microphone related. He can like blast people with a big blast of sound and knock them over.
Now that we did add, I will say we added the percussive abilities in the update of the character. My personal favorite old school Microface superpower is he does appear to have like little wires that will come out of his face with old school alligator clips, like little audio alligator clips. And so he can just like patch into a phone line and make a phone call. So there's like a lot of that going on in the comic book, which is very funny. We went ahead and didn't worry about that one on the updated version.
That didn't make it through.
Okay, now I'm curious, how contemporary is Microface's microphone? Like, does it have a loop pedal? Is there reverb? Like, what kind of effects are
we? None of this is canon. So if you are interested in that, if the price is right, I guess this is all part of our IP experiment. You can pay us to add effects, maybe. I don't know. We don't know. He does a lot of effects, though. So I would say pretty up to date. There's not a pedal per se, but he's doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah, he definitely does a lot of panning, is a big thing where he's got his voice coming in from different areas of the room. That's like a big skill that he definitely has. I don't know about the loop pedal, though.
Yeah, looping unclear.
Yeah, unclear.
That would be an interesting concept. Yeah. Having just watched Islander very recently, a musical that uses almost all looping as its like world, that's sitting on my brain as a concept.
Having just gone through tech on a musical, I'm really glad the whole thing was not looped. Really glad.
Especially for a one-night event, yes.
Yes.
That would have been lots of work, yes.
So much work for one night. So at what point did you sent in the demo and the show decided to pick up the piece?
Yeah, so basically Robert and Kenny were really excited about the idea and gave me kind of I guess you went back to your bosses to talk about it and to make sure everybody at Planet Money was on board, if I remember correctly. And
I think it was probably the lawyers we went to.
Yeah, it was the lawyers, probably.
Is there a way a contract works?
Yes.
And they were like, probably.
Right.
And so we're like, okay, this counts. Great.
Yes. And so basically I got to go ahead to develop this show. And I was pitching it as mostly as a podcast musical that would be a short show about 30 minutes long. I think it might have wound up 35. I'm not sure. I heard the recording. I was like, I might have gone a little over there. But pitching it as a 30-minute piece that could be played as a podcast as well as could be performed live. So I wound up writing a piece that, has full stage directions, but also has a ton of audio effects to help with it being comprehensible by audio only. So yeah, and then so I developed that I guess it was last summer, and then we were originally aiming to do this in the fall, but then of course COVID complications pushed it off till spring. But look, now we did it, so it all worked out.
We did. I will say after it got canceled in the fall, Kit came to a New York Comic-Con panel with us, and we just at the end of a presentation of like some new songs, I just like put on the board, I was like, coming spring 2022, and my boss was in the audience, and I was like, huh? Spring 2022? And he was like, yeah, sure, why not? And I think that was the first time we like kind of announced that it was going to be done again. It was with a very public question to my boss, and he was like, sure, we'll shoot for it.
Yeah.
Nothing better than holding people accountable by doing it out in the real world.
That's right.
Exactly. So we set it up to be this live Planet Money event that was part Planet Money podcast and then part musical done as a staged reading and recorded for podcast. Yes.
And so you mentioned that it's like written with like stage directions and such. Is this a show, speaking of the licensing loop, that could go forward and be performed on its own as a fully staged musical?
Absolutely. And if we have any licensing companies listening, please give me a call. My website is kitgoldstein.com.
and then yes. Kit needs to give me a call, because this may be future content for our content mill. Yes.
Exactly. We go back to the licensing loop where then I go back to NPR and I'm like, hey, could we do this thing? And then NPR is like, that would be fun. And then we do a thing. So, it's all in our licensing loop here.
Perfect. Yeah. We need to licensing loop, because this is going to be a thing.
Trademark that. That's a good trademark to have. Yes.
That's right. So Kit, I want to touch a little bit on the workshop process or the development process of creating the show. Could you speak a little more about that?
Absolutely. So there was basically already a comic book that was intended to exist about Microface, a new comic book, which is a whole other story I'll let Kenny go into.
What has just happened is Kit has been very kind. We wrote the story, and it took forever to make the comic book. It became a whole thing, and there's a whole episode of our show. That is actually the 6th part of the series, by the way, is like there is a 6th part, and it's that the comic book took forever. But that's what Kit's saying. She's being very kind.
Yes, but the good thing was that the story was written, and the basics of the whole thing were already there. It just wasn't turned into a comic book yet. So they let me see what was going to be the comic book so that I knew what sort of existed canon-wise already, because they gave me the license to not actually use the same story and directly adapt the comic book, but to come up with my own story, which was really wonderful, so that I could use what existed and then sort of leap off from there. And of course, I came up with a very economics themed story to go with this, as would be appropriate. Economics and podcasting themed story, I guess. So I came up with a story, and then Kenny and I Kenny was very in the loop about whatever I was doing, so that I wouldn't like show up with the totally wrong idea and be like, oh yeah, this is what Microface does now. And he would be like, what are you talking about? That's not Microface. So yeah, so we were pretty in touch while I was working on the ideas for it. And then I guess then I wrote it, and we did not even do a staged reading and went directly to this level. We didn't do we didn't do the sort of musical development process. We didn't do like the whole table read or staged reading, and it was wonderful. I loved it so much.
Yeah. Why belabor it when it's clearly gold, right?
Right.
Like, just go straight to the good.
Yeah, something that's good about doing a shorter show is you do have fewer opportunities to screw it up. So with like a 2.5-hour show, I do dearly love, staged readings and like a longer developmental process. But with a short show like this, you don't have a lot of side stuff going on. You don't have like trying to figure out, oh, did that side character get enough time or whatever. You don't have all the same sort of concerns as a 2.5-hour show. And having been through sort of the 10-year developmental process for musicals for plenty of my things, I really love being able to just sort of, make something that felt like it worked and then go do it. So yeah, it was awesome.
Oh, that's so cool to like have a micro process,
Yes, I
if
should
you
say.
will.
You mean a
Yes.
microphone process? Is that what you mean by micro in this case?
I should say there was feedback. Like Kenny and I definitely went through the script and tried to like make sure everything would be clear for podcasts. There was definitely like Robert Smith gave us some notes about like, is that thing theoretically possible? I talked to a couple people about like programming, because programming's involved, and about audio, audio broadcasting technical stuff. So it wasn't just like straight from first draft onto stage. Just to clarify that.
We were definitely like, I mean, a little bit of the Planet Money editorial process came in because it's, we're hoping it will function. Oh, this is an experiment for all of us, because we need this to work as a podcast. Like we need this to read audio only. And so a lot of like, there weren't a ton of notes for Kit in terms of like I don't know anything about music, so none of those were the notes, but it was just sort of like based on our experience doing podcasts for a really long time. I think people might get a little confused with this idea, especially since there were some economics ideas in there. It really did, like our role was sort of just like what we do every day, which is sit in on a script, read, and be like, I was a little confused here based on my experience doing this. I think you could tweak this, this, and this, maybe signpost this a little bit more, maybe just say this an extra 2 times and people will follow it. So that really was all I did. I was a dumb listener who said, I was confused here, make me unconfused. So everything else is Kit.
Yeah.
Oh, and I love how that collaborative that process is, and how it speaks to the storytelling aspect of podcasting, and especially what Planet Money does and what NPR does is storytelling. And what is theater but storytelling on stage? And so that's a really a cool way for those two art forms to blend and for you both to collaborate. So had you started rehearsals for the fall presentation, or was that scuttled like long before it could even get to the stage?
It got scuttled before we had to rehearsals, which was fortunate. Yeah, before we had a venue booked or anything. So that was actually kind of great that we didn't get far in beyond like general planning.
Yeah, there were like meetings, and then there were unmeetings where it's like, we're going to do this. And then like 2 meetings later, we should probably not do this. And we're like, yeah, that's probably right. That's about as far as it went.
Yes.
Oh, the fall was such a brutal time.
Totally.
Like, are we through this? No, we're not quite through this yet.
No.
Sure.
And even spring, we're not quite through this yet. So let's fast forward to the spring. And what was the rehearsal period leading up to this one night event?
We had about 2 weeks, I believe, of rehearsals. We only had about 4 rehearsals, and then tech, and then the performance. I'm sorry, that's my toddler shouting outside my door.
It's part of the podcast now.
Part of the podcast.
Part of the podcast.
Sorry.
We're all in our closets.
Yeah. So the rehearsal process, we had about 2 weeks, about 4 rehearsals, and then a separate band rehearsal, and then a tech, and then we went for it. So it was pretty fast. We only had about 5 or 6 weeks, notice on this whole thing that we were going ahead with it. So
yeah.
it was kind of an extremely fast time. Yeah.
There was a weird thing where it was like things seemed to be getting better, and it looked like the comic book was finally going to come out. And so reasonably, my boss was like, it probably would make sense to do the musical in conjunction with the comic book coming out because of the momentum. Because Planet Money will do an episode about the comic book and why it took so long, and then that certainly could help create some momentum for the musical. But I do remember very, very specifically like event planner types at NPR asking Kit things like, so what's like the minimum you need? Like, what's really the minimum amount of time you need? And the whole time I was in those meetings thinking like, oh, I don't know about this.
And I believe my answer was usually, I would like 3 months, but if you give me less, I'm going to do it in less. So, and unfortunately also fell right when I was committed. I also teach a lot and teach writing musicals to students in elementary schools. I work with the New York City Children's Theater and the Metropolitan Opera Guild on opera, working with opera with kids. And I also run my own company, Paper Kite Arts. And so, yes, I was very committed at the moment to many, many teaching programs. And so this whole thing was a little bit of a juggle, but we made it. And my teaching program is not too angry at me. No, actually, they were super supportive. Actually, one of the people I work with at the teaching program was there doing front of house, actually. So talk about supportive. Very supportive. Thank you, New York City Children's Theater.
And what was the casting process?
It was largely like people I know or can get a hold of in some way, or somebody else I know can recommend me in some way. So it was definitely like me sending a list of names to Kenny for every role and saying, here's a bunch of ideas, tell me your thoughts. And then Kenny writing back to me say, all these people are insanely talented.
They're all
How on
so
earth
good.
do
I'm
you
like,
pick?
well, I don't know, Kit. Like, all of these people are amazing. It's New York theater people. Like, what do you want from me? Like, they're all very good.
Yes, and I mean, we did definitely have like an actress who unfortunately had to drop out due to some problems, and which was very sad. But we love her very much, and so we did have some scrambles at the last second. But yeah, we found people, and they were awesome, so that was good.
Kit, I did ask. So our lead actor who played Sam Salazar, aka Microface, is an actor named Sebastian Treviño, and I did ask him before this interview, just like, what were you thinking when you got this email from Kit Goldstein Grant that just said like Microface podcast musical? And he did record his answer for us. I don't know if we can play that. Would that be possible?
Sure. Here we go.
Honestly, when I read her email, I had no clue what she was talking about. I'm like, listen, I don't understand what this is. Musical podcast, NPR, Planet Money. I have never heard of it. But hey, let's do this.
Yeah, he was definitely somebody I hadn't met who was recommended by our music director, who I should mention, Jonathan Lynch, who is a Planet Money listener and was an amazing music director. So it all worked out very nicely there. And he recommended Sebastian to us, which was great.
And what instruments were involved?
We did piano, bass, guitar, and percussion. Piano, bass, guitar, percussion. Yeah.
For which, Kit, you also did the orchestration, right?
I did. There were a lot of slashes. The drummer can tell you that. But yes, I did the orchestration. And Jonathan actually did the copying work for me because I was super stressed out. I was like, I have too much to do. And please, Jonathan, help me. Please help me and make it look okay for somebody to read this. So he wonderfully stepped up and did that for me. But yeah.
Brilliant. And who else was in your cast? So Kenny mentioned Sebastian Treviño. Who else was in the cast?
I'm going to pull up our cast list to make sure I don't forget anybody. Mukta,
Sure.
who I'm going to say, I realize now I don't know how to pronounce her last name. Is it Phatak, I think? Phatak. I'm going to spell it in case I'm pronouncing it wrong because I will be so sorry. But she was wonderful. She was Amina, one of the leads. And now you're going to find out how I never said anybody's last names or ask them how to pronounce them.
All very familiar. It's a big family, one big micro family.
Exactly.
Why use last names?
So Christopher Michaels was our villain. I've worked with Christopher Michaels on a huge number of projects over the years. He's directed a show I did at Theater Row, the Giant Hoax, in 2019. And he's also performed in many, many of my shows. And so I was delighted to work with him again. And who else was in it? And so for Tiffany, who was like the villain's sidekick, was played by Jillian Lewis, who's another, like, she's fantastic. She was in Broadway, on Broadway in It Should Have Been You, which was just amazing. And she's also taught with me at Paper Kite Arts, and we've worked together several times before, and she's wonderful. And a person who I'd never worked with before, who was just delightful to meet, who I'm going to mess up her last name. I'm going to try it. Johanna Carlisle Zepeda. I hope I'm saying that right. And she was actually here to do Americano off Broadway right now, and is not normally in New York. And we were just lucky to find her because she was like our ideal computer programmer for this show, and sang kind of what do you call that, the hit song of the show? Not the hit song. basically the hit song of the show.
Certainly got the ravest reviews from people I talked to.
Yes, a showstopper. That's the word. Saying showstopper about about the programming language COBOL. So yes,
standard stuff, standard musical fare,
standard musical theater type song. And then we had for our swings and ensemble, we had Luis Chino Ramos, who was amazing. And we had Yamina Melith, I believe I'm not sure how to pronounce her last name yet again, but I got her first name, which is Yamina. Yamina Melith, who was our other understudy and ensemble member. So they were both amazing as well. And she stepped in at the last second and saved our bacon. So I highly appreciate that.
And Kenny, this was Planet Money's first live show in a decade. What were the challenges for doing a live show and putting on a show during COVID?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the big one is making sure that everybody is safe and following protocols to keep everyone safe. And so we implemented a pretty rigorous testing and masking requirement for everything leading up to performance. And then for day of performance, everyone tested again and was masked when they were not performing. So just following as many of those as we possibly could, and really building as safe of an atmosphere as we could, because it's very fun to do a live show, but we certainly do not need to do this live show. And so we wanted to make sure everyone was safe, that we weren't being sort of careless there. And then in addition to that, it was that we, had 5 weeks. So it's a challenge. NPR has never staged a musical before. And so the evening was really split into 2 parts. It was going to be this live podcast that we were going to tape. And in theory, we make podcasts all the time. It really shouldn't be too hard, I guess, but figuring out what's going to play live and including some visuals is a little tricky. And then figuring out will those visuals then ruin the audio version because jokes only landed because they saw a visual. That is something I will admit I am going through right now and trying to figure out. It's what stuff do we need to explain, or how is this going to work exactly? How much crowd do you need? I listened to a first cut where someone had muted the crowd track, and I was like, well, this is unusable. And then I listened back with the crowd track. I was like, oh, thank God. It's just totally different experience. And I kept thinking about Howard Dean when he was pilloried for that weird moment where he's like, woo! And the story goes that what really was happening was the crowd was really loud, but you couldn't hear the crowd on his mic, so he just sounds like a bananas person. And so that was the effect for sure. And we just need to get the mix. What's clear is we're going to have to get the mix right. And this is something we never think about when we're making a podcast, is how much audience, how much should you hear the space? How much should you do? That stuff's going to be very interesting to play with, and I'm very excited to do it. So I suppose that's a challenge after the fact, but leading up to it is just mostly sprinting. And this is probably very confusing, but I had to make a lot of special comic books that we were selling along with tickets, and I had to personally hand make all of them, which was a dumb thing I signed up to do, and I shouldn't have probably. And so that was a lot of work. And so I bought a little Cricut cutter, and I was running it 24/7, making weird things, and it was all a lot. So that's neither here nor there. Yeah.
Yes.
That sounds like a DIY, community theater at its best kind of mode.
Yep.
Yeah. It was actually funny for me because I do a lot of sort of indie theater in New York, as well as doing other things as well. But for this one, where I'm sort of it tends to be that if I'm sort of producing something, then it's very indie. And if somebody else is producing it, it's less indie, right? And in this case, it's NPR was the producer, but I was the artistic producer, meaning I was getting the show together, which gave me the whole indie feelings. Yeah, it's just a different, it was really wonderful. It was really wonderful. And it was really fun to have so much artistic sort of control over it without having to be completely fundraising and everything as well. So that was great. Just get to put together a really cool team of people, and get to yeah. I also want to mention Blue Zephyra, who was our stage manager and also is a COVID compliance officer. So in terms of getting something actually onto the stage, they were completely essential to that process. So I just wanted to throw out a little thank you there.
Everyone was watching the show on the stage, but I was watching Blue, and that was the greatest show happening in New York City that night, was Blue managing
Yes.
this thing. Blue, Kit very kindly wrote in a lot of cameos for Planet Money folks. And we just knew early on that it was going to be way too complicated to bring everybody into rehearsals for like one line. And so the marching order was like, we need a situation where like kind of the stage manager just is managing all of the cameos. Like, you need to be here, you need to go say your line and back. And so Blue did that plus like everything else, and it was incredible. Incredible. One of the most amazing things I've ever seen.
Yes.
This is one of my wishes for when we film live theater, that we have a separate cam on the stage manager and that we get to watch a stage manager call a show. Because like you said, it is its own show and it is magical to watch. And these people are superhuman, speaking of superheroes.
Yes, absolutely.
Real life superheroes who wear mics on their face. I couldn't help
Oh,
myself.
that's true.
Good point.
Not at this one. We didn't
Yeah,
have the budget for that, so sorry. But yeah.
The true microface. And speaking of COVID officers, Kit, you unfortunately tested positive the day before the show. Can you tell us what happened there?
Yes, that was a pretty major bummer. I was just testing myself. Like, we did rapid tests at every rehearsal at the beginning. And this, because I was so distracted at rehearsal, I had so many things to do. I thought, I'll just test myself before I go, because then I can take a picture to show and, not have to deal with that at the beginning of rehearsal. And there was the little pink line. And so, of course, I went and did another one right away. Like, oh my God, I hope that's wrong. And it wasn't. And
false
then,
positive.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. So I wound up actually, that was like, I was going to go kind of early to rehearsal. So that was good because that gave me time to go get like a rapid PCR, an expedited PCR test, and then get back home in time to be on Zoom for the dress rehearsal. And luckily, Kenny was there for the dress rehearsal. He had come up to town already. So I was like nonstop texting with Kenny and Blue, our stage manager, and Jonathan, our music director, to sort of check in on everything. And they were nice and wrote me back so that I could make sure things. But by that point, the good thing was I'm the writer, and the writer is not actually super essential to the show. By that point, and by dress rehearsal time, like, we've already had the band rehearsal, we've already cleared up like composer questions. We still had a couple of composer things I needed to do. So like a couple of orchestrations I messed up that I needed to fix. But we were able to do that. Like, I was able to listen to that on Zoom and text Kenny to be like, how did that sound? And then text Jonathan to be like, oh, now change that. So we were able to fix those last minute things by Zoom. And and then I managed to watch the show through Zoom as well. And luckily, as I said, at that point, Blue was totally on top of the sort of what was happening day of. So the director was kind of like not as essential as I would have been if they were not so on top of things. And Jonathan, our music director, was also just pretty on top of stuff by that point. So everything was able to go smoothly, and I was able to watch on Zoom. And
I do want to say, like,
but it was great.
Being in the room and having Kit like text me these things that I'm completely unqualified to like answer, I got this very strange like inside like look into her brain. So I would get like, I pulled up the text feed from those days, and it's stuff like, can you tell if someone is switching between the glockenspiel, the high belly sounding xylophony thing? Is it messier than other songs? And I'm just like, I don't know, Kit. Like, I'm sorry, I'm trying.
But you did know,
and then she's worried,
and that's how we fixed it.
I'm getting these messages like, oh no, I forgot I was supposed to bring the clothes steamer. Someone will have to, I can give it to someone. I'm like, it's okay. Like, this is for a lead's shirt. And I was like, he's a reporter. Like, it's probably going to be wrinkled anyway. He's a reporter in the show. Like, it's fine. But yes, she could not leave any of the detail. Like, she was managing it incredibly from home. It was amazing.
I did wind up getting sort of symptomatic by later in that day. I was starting to cough, and then by the next day I was symptomatic. So by the next day I felt bad enough that I was kind of glad to not be at the theater. I was like, okay, I'm clearly sick. It's okay, I'm home. Because the first day I was like, I feel fine. I'm angry. I want to be at rehearsal. But not, of course, angry. But luckily, I mean, we did have very good COVID protocols, and I don't believe, everybody else was fine, which was great. And so that was really reassuring.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, that was the experience, watching it on Zoom.
And, as much as I hate that COVID happened at all, but how lucky we were that it happened in this day and age of technology and Zoom and text. And like, it's very easy to communicate with people in a way that we've never been able to.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The
Absolutely.
musicals about superheroes staged during the 1918 pandemic really would have been hard to do, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The 1918 flu pandemic, very different to the 2020
Yes,
COVID
yes,
superhero musicals.
yes.
So Kenny, tell us about the night itself at Roulette in Brooklyn.
It was, we didn't get this theater until about, I forget the exact time, but it was like 3 o'clock, and the show was at 8. So the load in was fast, and it, sound checks needed to be really quick. It really looked like a hill of army ants just like marching around. And I mean, by this point, I'm not really sure what I am supposed to be doing, and so I really am mostly watching sort of Blue just organize the thing and Jonathan run things and the tech rehearsals. Now, most of the Planet Money team had not sat in on any of the songs, and so there was this funny moment where they all came in at their call about 5 o'clock, and the cast was on stage, and they happened to be singing like the most on the nose moment in the entire show, where they're just saying micro 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 phase, micro 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 phase. And so Planet Money walks in, they're like, what is this that we're like in? Like, they don't know the plot of the show, and they just see people singing like the most microfacey thing. It was amazing, and I could watch all their faces just like, what's happening? But
Yeah.
they each rehearsed their cameo. They got a sense of what the plot was, and all of the other songs. And by the end, I think everybody had one of the like most surreal high nights of certainly of the last 2 years. It was incredible.
And audiences were able to register to come and watch the live taping or live recording?
Yeah, we sold out pretty quickly. We sold tickets. I think we sold out in about a week, right, Kit? Is that right?
6 days, I kept track.
6 days. There you go. 6 days.
6
Yeah,
days.
that's right. So I can't remember the exact theater count. It's like somewhere between 300 and 400. It might be around 400.
Yeah, it was around 400.
Yep.
It was around 400, and then we had like a couple last second tickets, people who also couldn't come for different reasons, and those went on sale, and those were gone by showtime as well. So yeah, it was a great crowd, as I could tell over Zoom.
It was a real
the anecdotal reviews I've seen are glowing.
Mhm.
Everybody had such a great time.
It was a real home crowd for sure, which is great, because I mean, it was sold as a Planet Money event and a musical around this superhero. I think one of our promos had advertised it as like the infinity gauntlet of joyous nerddom, like musical theater, economics, and microface. And it was just like, if you're into those three things, then like there isn't a place on earth on Tuesday night better than this. And I did, it's funny. I asked, again, like having talked to Sebastian Treviño about just the difference between performing rehearsals and live. I just asked if anything had surprised him about performing in front of this fan base in particular. And there's a second soundbite there if you want to play his response. I really liked it.
There were so many things that landed once we had the audience that I didn't even know or think that they were going to be funny. But since everyone in the crowd was so passionate about Planet Money, about Microface, there were jokes that they really got, that it was for them. And I loved that. And there was such a fun and easy crowd to please. And as an actor and performer, one loves that, because sometimes you do a show where like, damn, it's like you're pulling teeth from them to get a laugh, or just to even get some sort of gesture that tells us that they're enjoying the show. And here it was just bliss all along, and they were so happy to be there and enjoying every second of it. And that makes our lives extremely, extremely easy.
Yeah, something that made me actually so happy with that was seeing the audience get, because I'm a Planet Money listener, and I had lots of, little references in there, and, economic little jokes in there and stuff. And it was so delightful to see the audience really getting all of those moments. and also listening so closely to the lyrics, which made me really happy because as a lyricist, as you know, if you are musical people, like often the lyrics are a little hard to understand or you miss things. And when you're a lyricist, like you care so much about every single word. And you're like, oh, I hope somebody gets my little joke in there. So it was great to like see, these great audio engineers at NPR who did such a good job making it clear. And then also an audience who was actually like very much attuned to like listening for those specific lyrics was really, really delightful. Delightful. Yeah. I could see it in
Okay,
the
this
back of their
sounds like
heads.
a dream gig for a composer lyricist, and it should be the future of developing new musicals.
Yeah, let's do it. I love
That's
that idea.
interesting. I do like that.
But yeah, no, it's really delightful. And I mean, as somebody who writes a lot of musicals that are so ephemeral, it can be really frustrating to do a great show and then have it just be gone. So it's really wonderful to have something recorded like this for me, and that doesn't just disappear into thin air after it's performed. And especially, I don't know if you know about like there's a lot of like equity, union rules about recording that often make it very difficult to record things or cost prohibitive for certain productions. And so I actually wind up with very few recordings of my work, which
And not
is
just audio, but film recordings
film
you're
recordings
referring
as
to.
well. Exactly. And so it's just like it can be very, very costly to make recordings. And so it's just kind of delightful for me to get to have like a wonderful high quality recording of this and have that be kind of the purpose is we are both doing the wonderful ephemeral one night only thing, but then we're also making this recording as well. So yeah, very wonderful.
And speaking of, when will this live episode be available?
It's going to be split into two parts. So the first section that is functionally a podcast that was recorded in front of the crowd will be in the next few weeks from this recording. So we're looking at late May, maybe early June, but I think late May. Now we don't know exactly when we're going to release the musical yet. There's going to be a few factors, like when we can get a proper engineer in to sort of mix it, and when that time is available, and when it makes the most sense to kind of put it down our feed and space out the Microface content. We don't want to turn the Planet Money feed into an exclusively Microface channel. So we're still working on the exact release date, but certainly soon. Spring 2023 question? No, it's earlier than that. Yes,
There's something very comic book about that, where like the experiment that you have created is taking over your feed.
It is true. It is definitely true.
Absolutely.
So to wrap us up, I have a segment called My Favorite Things.
These are a few of my favorite things.
For order, Kit, you can go first. To start us off, what is your favorite musical?
Oh, this is so hard. Okay, I totally can't pick my favorite musical, but I'm gonna list one anyhow with the caveat that I know I'm gonna say one. It's just like that I totally have so many that are my favorite. I'm gonna go with Ragtime right now because I love Ragtime so much, and for some reason, like the Henry Ford song just popped in my head when you asked that question. So I'm gonna go with Ragtime right now. But there are so many.
I understand. Mine
Yeah.
changes depending on my mood, the day.
Exactly. I would have a different answer for you probably like in an hour. So I'll probably call you up in the middle of the night and be like, no, it was this one. But I do love Ragtime super much.
Wonderful. Kenny, do you have a favorite musical?
It's funny. The favorite question is funny because one time I forgot my password to buy treasury bonds as an experiment for work. I apparently already had an account to buy treasury bonds, and I was doing it as an experiment for work. And the security question they asked me on the phone is, what is your favorite movie? And I was like, I don't remember. And so I guessed like 4 movies, and I was like, I'm really curious. What is my favorite movie now? Like, what did I put? It really does change all the time. My favorite musical, it goes back and forth. Like I love Les Mis. I'm a basic Les Mis person. I love Les Mis so much. But I also love The Great Comet so much. I think The Great Comet is one of my
Kenny,
favorite shows ever.
I thought about answering both those things, just so you know.
Listeners can't see, but Kit just elevated out of her chair at that answer.
I love The Great Comet so much, and yeah, I guess the question for me is like, the only reason I don't say it immediately is because it's like, Les Mis has been around for a long time. Like, will I still love The Great Comet in 30 years? But the answer is almost certainly yes. I love it so much. So
those were
yeah,
both
that's my favorite. Let's say The Great
both
Comet.
extremely
Love
high
it.
on my list too. I grew up listening to Les Mis, and it's like the
By the
standard, best musical
by the
ever.
way,
Yeah.
I got the old, like, the original Broadway cast vinyl, and all the songs don't fit on it, which is annoying. But there is so much synth in that original recording. I was like, wow, is this synthy? I did not expect it, and was sort of delighted. I was like, this is really weird and really fun. Very synthy.
Peak 80s orchestration.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely.
Do you have a favorite filmed live musical? So a musical that has been performed on stage and filmed on stage.
I always liked. I saw the Barnum film with
With Michael
Michael
Crawford?
Caine or Michael Crawford. Oh my God, I said Michael Caine. Yes, Michael Crawford. Yes, and I guess I'm having a hard time being sure if that's my favorite one, but it's definitely the one that just like pops into my head that I enjoyed watching super much.
I love that. That's a deep dive into the archive.
Okay, yeah. It's
Yeah.
been a couple of years, which is why I was like, I should think a little harder, but that's so much popped into my head that I have to say it.
I believe it's available to stream on Amazon.
This is a little bit of a weird answer, but it's not a full musical that's readily available, but there is a clip from the David Letterman show that is the villain song from Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark that I watch all the time because it is so wild. And do you know the one I'm talking about, where like the villains break into the Ed Sullivan Theater, and it's I love it so much. It's so weird, and I wasn't around when that show was on. I never got to see it, but I mean, it's pretty wild. And so is it my favorite? I don't know. I watch it the most for sure. I certainly can't like stand by the quality of it, but I love that everyone's committed to it, and it is pretty fun to watch.
Oh, there is like a whole research
I
project for musicals performing on late night and early morning TV. Like the way that it has spread the brand of musical theater, and like how Rosie
yeah.
O'Donnell did a whole thing back in the day. Like historically musicals appearing on television as like hour-long versions, and there's a whole bit
Yeah.
of research to be done there.
I don't know if that one helped musicals at all. Like, I feel like that is exactly what people think of when they think of musicals in not a good way. But it is just like, I don't know. I can't get enough of it. It's pretty great. I certainly recommend
Spider-Man
it.
Turn Off the Dark
It is one of my favorite things.
quite an adventure of its own.
I mean, a big swing is a big swing, and I just love it.
So a filmed live musical isn't exactly a stage show, and it's not exactly a film. So what should we call them?
Not filmsicle. I definitely don't like filmsicle.
Filmsicle.
I definitely don't like that. I said that, but I do not like it. I should think about this. I'm actually hoping to make one in the next couple of years when somebody gives me a lot of money for it.
What answers have you gotten? What answers have you gotten on this? I'm
All
very
kinds
curious.
of things. Pro shot.
Pro shot.
That's like
that sounds like a
common
golf ball.
term now for a professionally filmed stage show. It's like become common parlance. Gosh, I'm blanking on others. Live movie, filmed live. Like it's a tricky one because we don't have the language for it yet.
Live to film. What are I don't even know. Like, it feels so new to me, but clearly your podcast demonstrates that it isn't. It's. I mean, everyone's talking about like it's the renaissance of filmed musicals in COVID because all of these very expensive musicals are being filmed. But clearly that is not a new thing.
I actually worked with Apples and Oranges Arts. I don't know if you know them, but they do a program, a theater accelerator, it's called, where they work with musical writers to work on sort of making their shows stronger and working on their pitches as well. They have a Shark Tank like thing too that I went on, where you pitch your show to producers. And yeah, they're very interested in, this was pre-COVID, got really interested in filming musicals, and worked with streaming musicals as well, that company as well, to make these. So it got me really thinking at that point about, that I would love to do one of these where it's filmed in a theater. And it's definitely now like a goal of mine to do with one of my shows, which I think would do really well with that. My show, The Nose, in case anybody's listening and needs to give me a lot of money to do that. It was very popular, and there should be a film movie version of it, but a filmed on stage version would be great. And it's like this.
We just don't know what to call that.
Yes, I just need to get
whatever
there and
that's
pitch that.
called.
But yeah, I guess it's gonna have to be filmsicle, but I don't like it. I'm not
really
into
like
it, but I'm gonna have to go with that.
It's a tricky one, and
Yeah.
I can't wait to have you back when The Nose has become a filmed live musical.
Thank you.
Where do you stand on bootlegs?
Like, how many do we own personally? Like, where? What do you mean?
What do you should they be allowed? Should they exist? Should we watch them? Should we consume them? Should we ban them?
I disapprove of them generally, except for that sometimes I make exceptions for academic purposes. So it is good. I want there to be something that people can watch to see a show. And like, if you're, studying something, but that's why Lincoln Center's library of filmed things exists, which I think is great. I wish every show could have an official version so there wouldn't have to be bootlegs. And I'm really wishing, and I do know that that's a lot to do with union rules is why that it doesn't exist. And so I mean, that is something I would love to be sort of like addressed more, following now we've all seen during COVID how much that people could really use that. And I wish that something that could be addressed in terms of making it more doable in some way for producers to make the official version. So we don't have to go have any bootlegs. Yeah. I also have no time to ever watch anything on television, so on screen or whatever, because I have a toddler, so I don't watch any bootlegs. That's helpful. Having zero time, so if I'm going to the theater, I'm going to have a babysitter, and I'm going to go to the theater.
Kenny, let's start with you. What stage musicals do you wish had been filmed?
I mean, the great comment. I wish more than anything had been filmed. I mean, it makes me very sad. I wish it were still running. I wish I could see it all the time. That's obviously my big one. Yeah.
I second that. Kit?
I second that one actually as well. I loved that show.
Would it work?
Well,
Would it work filmed though? So much of it is the immersion.
I actually didn't see it on Broadway because I love the immersion off Broadway, the tent that it was in. And so I didn't want to ruin I saw it twice off Broadway, which for me, that's a big deal because like I never have any time to see anything, and seeing something twice, that was even pre-toddler. My life's always been like this. So it was a big deal to see that twice. But yeah, it would be hard. It would have to be filmed in some very specific way, which I do not want to be the director of.
Maybe VR. Maybe that should have been the VR film. Like that should have been filmed in VR.
That's a good idea.
Oh, absolutely. There's a musical from the UK, The Grinning Man, and Andy Serkis captured it in motion capture. The whole musical has been captured in motion capture, and it hasn't been released. It hasn't been released yet, but I'm like, the potential for what that technology could do with live theater is so exciting.
So when you say Andy Serkis captured it all, did he play every role?
Oh no, he like directed
or did he put the things on everybody,
Yes.
the little balls?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, he directed it, and they recaptured the entire performance with every original cast member in motion capture. And I'm
that is
like, when is that coming out, please?
And what do the union contracts look like for the vector of a performance? Who owns that? That's bizarre.
Yes, that's going to be an interesting podcast.
The vector data of your
Planet
performance.
Money, next episode, please.
Yeah.
Oh, a whole Planet Money world on filming stage shows.
Oh yeah, it's.
This is an elaborate pitch.
That's what this entire thing
You're
was.
right.
Yeah.
You caught me.
This is the ruse. Yeah.
What stage musicals would you like to see filmed in the future?
What stage musical? All of them.
Microface the musical.
Definitely that one. Definitely.
Was the
that one.
concert captured on film at all, or just audio?
I mean, there's like a bad
Yeah.
Zoom recording of it.
You literally cannot see faces.
But yeah, we didn't have the we barely had the capacity to do what we did. So it's a minor miracle that exists. There's enough to show like our moms if we want, but it's not publishable. Like it's just not.
Well, when it's licensed and performed by amateur groups and theaters across the country and potentially across the world, we will get a capture.
Exactly.
Yes. Maybe a motion capture.
Hey, there we go.
Yeah.
Andy, are you listening?
Absolutely.
Finally, where can we find each of you online?
You can find me at kitgoldstein.com or at Totally Irrelevant Productions, which is the name of my production company that hosts Paper Kite Arts, my teaching company. So yeah, you can find me, and they both link to each other. Find me there.
And you can find me co-hosting Planet Money. So in every like third podcast that we release, working on those. And then I'm all over Twitter doing customer service for the comic book it took a year to release. That is mostly my online presence at the moment.
Oh, yes. And if you would like a copy of a digital copy of some of the sheet music from Microface, if you sign up for my newsletter on my website, I'm going to be sending out a copy for one of the songs when the podcast is released. So, come and sign up. I'm also on all the Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all that stuff as well.
Fabulous. And I will have links to all of that in the show notes.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much for your time today. This has been a lot of fun.
It's been so nice talking to you today.
Yeah.
To finish up today's episode, we have a demo from Microface the musical written by Kit Goldstein Grant.
I can whisper softly and you hear it all around. I can play a bass that rumbles through the ground. Throw my voice and tell those robbers, hands up in the air. They run the other way and then I catch them in my snare. It's time for Microface. It's time for Microface. The sonic superhero that the world will soon embrace. With this invention I could spread omnidirectional good. Set my levels high and hear the misbehaviors yelp. Soon the FBI and cops are calling me for help. As the villains think their vicious planning is complete, I send a wave of sound so loud it knocks them off their feet. It's time for Microface. It's time for Microface. With macro and micro crimes, you bet I'm always on the case. With this invention I could spread omnidirectional good. It's time for Microface. It's time for Microface. My panning and compression leaves the villains in disgrace. With this invention I could spread omnidirectional good. Get ready for Microface.
The Filmed Live Musicals podcast is created and edited by your host, Luisa Lyons, with thanks to our wonderful patrons, Josh Brandon, Geraldine Brewer, Belinda Broido, Elliot Charles, Jillian Dos Santos, Rachel Esteban, Mercedes Esteban Lyons, David Jones, James T. Lane, Heather Madrone, Alison Matthews, Al Monaco, David Negrin, Amy Penn, Gerald Piper, Jesse Rabinowitz and Brenda Goodman, David and Catherine Rabinowitz, Joe Tilliston, and Beck Twist for financially supporting the site. FilmedLiveMusicals.com is the most comprehensive list of film, stage musicals. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. If you would like early access to this very podcast, early access to site content, the full weekly newsletter with info on upcoming streams, and exclusive access to the streaming calendar, become a Filmed Live Musicals patron for as little as $3 a month. And if you're outside the US, you can sign up in your local currency. Visit FilmedLiveMusicals.com to learn more. If you like what you hear, please leave a review in your podcast app. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and thanks for listening.